We have our own trivia show, Will. Except that you muted yourself.
I did. I'm trying to spread the gospel of the Will and Dave show on Facebook.
So did you hear your brother's line this week?
Come on.
That all we need yet to survive the next year is the Will and the Dave? Or something to that effect. Oh, we have one viewer. It's either your mom or Tim, one of the two. Murder spies have arrived on our shores. So for next week, I will have new trivia questions.
Ooh.
Which one was it again? It's Tim, he says.
Your title on the YouTube video is still the old one.
I saved
Still
it.
Vaccination, Rollout, and Management in Prisons.
Oh, because I added afterwards. I added a whole line after that of, no, it's not.
Okay, I see it.
Yeah.
Nope, not even close. Never mind.
Yeah.
Nice. You bamboozled even me.
Well, there you go. Our Sean Connery trivia, because he's another one who didn't make it through 2021.
Thanks for reminding me.
And Tim says, it's me. He just comes to harass me. I think next time we're going to bring him on the show so he can harass me in person.
Either way, as long as you're getting harassed, I'm happy.
The Republican Party's symbol is a phallus. Or a fallacy. A really big trunk. You should know this one, Tim. How old was he? Youngest Prime Minister in Canadian history.
Oh.
It was less than 364 days.
Lightly related to that, because I did the Royal Canadian Air Force Joe Clark laugh.
Yeah.
Speaking of Royal Canadian Air Force and pandemics, do you remember remember anthrax? Remember making anthrax jokes all the time? Remember how that was like a big thing once upon a time?
I do.
Wow, were we ever wrong? Like all the different strains of anthrax?
Because I go through 19 scenes. Hey, Will. How's it going?
How you doing today?
Well, once I get the scenes all up and running, well, I'm doing good. It's been a week and it's been a day.
I'm glad the week's over.
Oh man, I got one more day. Yes, for me, my weekend's on Sunday, not Saturday.
Fair enough.
I'm not a Seventh-day Adventist like you, apparently.
Yeah, that's me.
So we're going to get this out of the way early. We're going to do the sponsors first because I don't want to piss them off if we get into the other stuff. So I want to give a shout out to Stitched by Susan. It's my wife. She's amazing. We did a webinar today. She was live on air for several hours. She has been live. I think she was live for about 12 hours over the past week and a half. And she's just amazing. And so if you're interested in what she does, you can see her on YouTube at youtube.com/Stitched by Susan. And she's there.
We'd also like to thank our benefactors, Kelly and Dottie Hardy, for supplying me with this lovely microphone. However, they may not know they supplied me with this lovely microphone.
But they
we're very
sponsor the
grateful
show
for their support, both monetarily and emotionally, as we need all the emotional support we can get on days like today.
Yes. And lastly, and not least, is Raftergy Land and Cattle Company. And I was talking to Howard and Karen this week, and Karen says, that was not meant to sponsor the show. That was for you and Susan. And I said, yeah, but it also includes William. And since you gave it to us, we get to use it for the show. So therefore, you're a show sponsor.
They get to enjoy the free publicity. The people that I don't know if they're actually in that. I don't know if anyone that listens to us is going to buy anything from them, but
it doesn't matter. That's exactly right. And it was funny because I told her that she was a show sponsor and she should watch the show. So she and Howard tuned into the 1 week that we talked about bras. And she said, I turned it off, I walked away, said, Howard, he can watch that. So I had to do some
a little bit of damage control there.
just a bit, yeah. So there's our sponsors, Will. Would you like to do our content advisory for this week? You're on.
So today we're likely going to talk about some pretty hairy stuff, seeing as there was a lot of violence and lawbreaking in the States. We'll also be talking likely about some racially motivated violence and some large-scale violence and inciting of violence online and through other mediums. So just be aware, there's going to be a lot of talk of violence, both small and large-scale today. So that is your content warning.
Welcome to the
Oh, what a lovely note to roll over the intro on.
Here we are, Will.
Welcome, welcome, welcome. Thanks for joining us at the table tonight, folks.
Oh, gosh, William.
Can you hear the excitement in my voice? The joy, the raw energy just coming out of my vocal cords right now.
So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a backstory. So we're on air about a half hour or so before the show, and Will said, well, if I'm a little more deadpan tonight, it's because I sort of want to hold myself back a little bit, or I don't want to deal with all the emotion. And you can word it better than I do. And I said, no, Will. I said, emotion sells. So let's get pissed at each other. Let's get mad. So if there are fireworks, it's my fault, not his.
No, I'll own what I say. I'm going to say things.
It's such a week. I feel drained. I feel just, and it's not even the politics. It isn't even the violence, because we've had violence and politics all week, or all summer rather, all year. This is just it's sort of like the cherry on top of a sundae, and you're going to have a heart attack after you eat it, except you have to eat the darn cherry too. Is that a bad analogy, Will?
I mean, that could work for you. Mine was like watching a tragedy unfold, but you're glued to it. You can't stop watching it. I mean, that's more literal.
We are preoccupied, Tim.
Yeah, existential dread setting in. So I'm going to give a quick recap for anyone who doesn't know, in case you don't know what we're talking about today. We're going to be talking about and around the events that unfolded at the U.S. Capitol building, I believe.
Yes.
The building? Yeah, around the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th and 7th, roughly.
Yeah.
And the fallout from those events when, during the process of ratifying the election results, people broke through the barriers and broke into the Capitol building, forcing an evacuation and a lockdown of the building, forcing the calling in of the National Guard to come and restore order and to remove people from the building. So, yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about, because there's a lot to unpack. That's really condensed.
This whole idea that there was an act of violence at the Capitol building, nobody should be surprised at. It's been in social media, it's been on the paper, it's been everywhere for about a month and a half. After the election, they said, we're going to take it. It's going to be, it isn't news. It was actually, it was one of the things I was watching an interview with I can't remember, an army guy, a security guy, I can't remember. It doesn't matter. And he was He was amazed at the lack of security at the Capitol building, knowing what was going on.
Yeah.
This was not, and he was saying, this is not a surprise. They knew this was going to happen. It's sort of like Pearl Harbor. There were a lot of reports that they knew Pearl Harbor was coming and like, oh, damn, what happened? And I feel the same about this, is that this is not, it shouldn't have been a shock.
Yeah. As we get into this, I want to make one quick little addendum before I start saying a bunch of things. I'm going to try to utilize the word unverified as liberally as I can when I talk about what people have said around this event. If I think that something is verified, I'll probably just say it. If I think there's even the slightest doubt as to the validity of a claim or a statement that's been made that I've read about in the media, I'm going to try to label that as unverified, because I don't know. And when I say unverified, I don't want people to take that as a probably or like 90% sure. Unverified, it means unverified. It could go either way. It's just what I have heard.
I was telling a story. Hold on, I'm going to interrupt you just on that note before you continue with your story. I had some friends over. I was telling them a story that I had heard third hand. So before I told the story, I said, before you go on, if you repeat the story, it's then fourth hand. And everybody knows what happens in the game of telephone. So I'm sort of...
Dang it.
What?
That's the metaphor I make in my blog post. It's going to be about the word unverified.
Oh, okay.
I used it. Well, spoiler alert, everybody.
Yeah.
It's like a bad game of telephone.
Yes.
When Jim Bob says unverified reports that XYZ happened at the Capitol building, and then Bill says, "Wow, reports that XYZ happened at the Capitol building. That's amazing." And then the third person's like, "Oh my God, XYZ happened. What's this world coming to?" And it spirals.
It does.
Very fast. And so we're going to try to be as particular as we can with whether or not things are verified. And we hope that if you talk to other people about the things we talk about on the show, that you also keep in mind that many of these things that we're saying are third, fourth, and fifth hand. I mean, only so much information is directly released by law enforcement.
Here is what is verified. Is our opinions are verified. They are our opinions.
Yeah, too.
I own my opinion. I'm sure you own your opinion. And
it's not worth very much.
They're not worth much, apparently, because all we have are 3 sponsors instead of 300 sponsors, all giving us $1 million a piece so we could retire on that beach behind me on the TV. But Facebook, the greatest game of telephone. I'm putting that one in, Tim. That's awesome. I feel that we need opinions. And we love our own opinions. We really do. We're going to get into some here really quickly, but
pretty attached to mine.
They are opinions.
Mm-hmm.
And they're sort of like armpits. Everybody has them.
So with that tangent out of the way, going back to the lack of security at the Capitol building, there are unverified reports, as far as I know, that DC law enforcement made the request for the National Guard the day before. So they made the request on January 5th, and the Department of Defense said no.
Yeah,
which makes little sense to me.
Yes.
I don't understand what, for a Department of Defense that wanted to roll out the National Guard all over the country during BLM protests. They're like, I do understand that numerically, this rally was much smaller than most of the BLM protests that happened in many major cities.
Yes.
I mean, we're talking, what, I think estimates are like anywhere between 1,800 to 2,500 people at this rally, give or take.
That's what I heard, but I've also heard it was as high as 10,000, so I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Whereas BLM, again, ranged into the many thousands in many, many cities. So there's some consideration there, but it still seems very, to quote the modern lingo, it's pretty sus. It's pretty sus.
I'm not even going to go there. That shortening of words just kills me. And then you go and you yank out words out of your armpit that nobody knows. Like, yeah, no. Suspect. That's very suspect. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
It's
pretty irregular.
Eat some bran. It is it may be suspect, Will, again, but for me, I'm not as worked up about the events as I'm about the reaction to the events and the reason for the event, for the violence.
Yes.
That's where I think our conversation, it takes a divergent opinion is when we look at the cause and we look at what the reaction to it was.
I think I think for both of us, actually, I think most of my outrage happens in regards to reactions to the events as opposed to the events themselves. Like, I've seen people debating online, how many members of that group that infiltrated the Capitol building, of the rioters that infiltrated the Capitol building, how many of them may have been Antifa members, etc., masquerading, etc., etc. And the long and short of it is, I don't care. They're criminals. They're rioters.
Whoever went into the building, whoever was smashing
Yeah.
windows is a criminal.
You can call them domestic terrorists for all I care, but it doesn't matter which side they were for. They did it, and they need to be punished for it. What matters more to me is the reactions to it.
Right. So I guess I would go a little bit further, because I do think, gosh, I'm going to get on my high horse. In relation to the rest of the riots all summer that we've had, and the violence and the car bombings or burnings anyways, and the Molotov cocktails, etc., and all the violence all summer long, and the hundreds of arrests and the
Thousands, many thousands.
yeah
You're lowballing there, Chief.
of arrest. And I was looking for data on the riots this summer. I really was. I was trying to do research, and so I could have a little bit of data to back myself up. You know how hard it is to find data? There's a Wikipedia article on the race riots, but it's so minuscule in comparison.
Yeah.
Now, a death is a death. And we've had that conversation about COVID. A death is a death. Yeah, I get that. But in comparison to the race riots, this is a skirmish, outside of LA in comparison to the Vietnam War.
Yes.
The only difference is at the Capitol building, and now all of a sudden we have a president-elect who's saying this is domestic terrorism.
So,
and with the other one, he was attending the funeral of the victim.
yeah,
There's not a correlation. There's not a fair observance. Is that the word I want? Of this event?
I think so. I would. First off, I want to actually give credit where it's due in relation to, like, as you say, with the innumerable race-related protests and riots that have happened this year. I think credit deserves to be given to people on the right wing who have taken part in any large protests over the course of this year specifically. There have been a lot where they have openly carried firearms and been a much bigger potential threat or potential problem, and they have not been. They have been historically much more peaceful protesters this year than people associated with the race riots. And I think that deserves mentioning. Not that it changes it at any way, but I think it's worth mentioning. And as you say, the scale is different, but I think that's kind of like, I'm trying to think of a comparison, like the scale of atrocities that happened in World War II. I mean, people died. People died all over the place.
Right.
But then one bomb was dropped, or two bombs were dropped
Right.
in Japan, which comparatively in terms of numbers are much smaller, but because of the quality and the type of action taken. So in this case, the violence and the number of people involved is much smaller than the race riots.
Right.
But it was perpetrated on the Capitol building. And I also think the politicians, this is just me, they're getting the American high school treatment right now, and they're scared. I think that they're taking it a lot more personally, because this is no longer something that happens to somebody else for them. It happened to them. They had to hide behind their chairs, fearing for their lives, and I think that rattled them. And I think they're taking it personally.
Well, I don't know if I am the only one in America who stayed up until 1:45 in the morning the other morning and watched the whole debate on what's it called? Electoral College.
Yeah.
Electoral.
I had to take
electoral
small
ballots.
breathers in between, but I did make it to the end
And
of the announcement.
I have never heard such a mass of blithering idiots postulate and expound upon this horrible event, knowing that it would not change the outcome, it would not change anything, but they just had to have their say. They'd use their 5 minutes, and they went on for 2 hours in the Congress. The Senate, in all thankfulness, had their vote and was done about 15 minutes. I think most of them had to go get their hit of Metamucil and take a nap before for the next vote. But or change their depends, because most of them are over the age of deceased. But it was so frustrating to watch them, in one case, almost come to blows.
Yeah, that was
over foolishness, knowing that it was not going to change the outcome. They just had to have their say, hoping they would score a political point.
Yeah,
knowing.
It gets me when the whole debate was that Republicans were arguing that Democrats were lying and cheating and stealing the election, and then when one Democrat calls one other Republican a liar, it almost comes to blows because he's so incensed. Like, Jesus, get off your horse. There is no horse high enough for that.
Well, I think the name calling was going in both directions. Just one had a shorter fuse than the other one.
I'm just saying that, like, with all the name calling that was happening, and the name calling that senator was doing, for him to take such.
There's a congressman, by the way.
That's right, congressman. To take such deep offense to being called a liar, I think he needs to. Here's $5, buy a spine.
He's a politician.
Yeah, he doesn't have one.
Well, no. Isn't lying what they do?
There's an old joke. There's an old joke that I've modified, and it fits right now. There's a couple of doctors, right? They're sitting down for lunch one day, and one doctor says, "Hey, I operated on an electrician today. It was the easiest operation of my life. Everything is color-coded in there." And the second doctor is like, "Nah. I operated on a mechanic today. They're even easier. Because no matter what you do, there's always a couple spare parts left over at the end." And the third doctor is like, "I got it easy. I operated on a politician. They're heartless, spineless, brainless, and their asses are interchangeable with their heads."
I'm sure nobody's ever heard that one before, Will, but it's still good. I guess at the end of the day, and again, so we argued more about this the other day. I'm not sure what we're arguing about, but it is the two-faced nonsense out of politicians killed me the other day. And I sat there thinking, really, guys? There's no debate, and yet you have to open your mouth for your allotted 5 minutes, and I yield the balance of my time to the next so-and-so so he can argue. It was...
Or the ones who pushed their 5 minutes and just kept on talking. I mean, of all the most... I don't watch very much of what happens in Congress, and I'm sure there's lots of people talking over their allotted time limits, but it just seems so rude to me.
It was an exercise in frustration.
Thank you, number one fan, Tim. Couldn't agree more. On both sides of the fence. I want to be clear, that's not just Republicans I'm crapping on. I'm crapping on a lot of Democrats too. A lot of them could have just sat down and made the whole thing go faster if they didn't feel like they had to use their 5 minutes to seem important.
That right there, by the way, guys, was William saving our algorithm by not saying bad words.
I'm working real hard, okay? You think the work goes into writing or researching? No.
Restraint.
Not swearing.
That's right. Restraint. So I sat through all of that, and this is one of the things that got me, Will. Again, I remember what we were arguing about. And again, I'm going to bring it up because I want to argue.
Bring it on, TV.
So we were talking about the relationship in between the race riots and this riot. And I was saying that the right of, especially the far right, the extreme right, except a lot on the right half of center, feel hurt and slighted and aggravated at a multitude of, if you will, offenses, if you want to call them that. Mm-hmm. And your answer was, yeah, but this was only because they lost. They lost the election. Yeah. And I said, wait a minute. And you said,
because I think it's an oversimplification. I think.
okay, well, I'm glad you came to see my point of view because I'm right.
Yeah. I wouldn't go that far. I just amended mine.
Well, I do want to say that we were arguing before the show, but wasn't even arguing, and Will's mic wasn't working. And I said, well, you do this, that, and the other thing, and it'll work. And so he unplugged it. And apparently while he was unplugged, he said that I was right, but
We'll never know.
there's no evidence of that fact that
No
I was
record.
right. The record will not show that Dave was right once.
Yeah.
And this whole idea that it was okay for the BLM, for the race riots and all this kind of stuff, and we can go and attend the memorial of a criminal in support of BLM. And in this case, there is very little acknowledgement of what was the reason for the violence. And there is a real feeling on the right of we've had enough.
Right.
And the fact that it spilled over is a horrible thing. And please, this is not advocating. Right, exactly. Exactly, because you have the BLM saying there's no support of the rioting and the violence, but there's a reason in behind that. And I guess,
Yep.
and one of the things, you posted an article on Facebook here the other day by
I
Tucker.
posted about Tucker Carlson, and I did use some language there.
Yes, it's on Facebook. They don't care. And
Nobody cares.
and when I saw that, I thought, but his whole point is valid. There's anger on the part of the right, and we have to fix the reason for it. As there is a valid reason if you're
Yeah.
one of the ones on the right.
A large part of my indignation over this all, thanks for the camera,
Anything for
is
you?
how little recognition, and I believe this goes both ways, how little recognition one side, in this case the right, has for why the race riots happen. Like, they seem to have, if they have a fundamental understanding of why they happen, they don't talk about it very often. Largely, I assume, because talking about how people feel doesn't really sell. They want to talk about really nasty shit. They want to, or things. They want to talk about what is inflammatory because it sells. But now that something has happened the other way around, now that some people on their side have done something extreme because of how they feel and how they feel slighted or unheard or done dirty by, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now all of a sudden they become very understanding. They become very, we get why it's happening. Like, it's unrest, and the unrest isn't acceptable. What they did wasn't acceptable, but we need to understand why they're doing it. I agree. Why couldn't they figure that same thought process out for people on the other end of the political spectrum? And this criticism of mine, I want to be clear, goes both ways. The number, like, I spent, where you spent, I think, a lot of your time watching Senate and Congress meeting, I spent most of it doom scrolling Twitter. And
That's
I tried
painful.
to find it is. The term doom scrolling sounds ugly because it is. And I tried to keep as even a mix as I could between right-wing tweets and pages and left-wing. And I want to be the first to call out people on the left for not acknowledging why these things happen. They assume, like I was saying the other day, like this is why I amend
Yeah.
my previous statement. A lot of people on the left just assume that it's because they lost the election that they're mad. It runs deeper. And I think the same applies to people on the right who just assume that people involved with BLM and whatnot are just mad that George Floyd died, and it runs a lot deeper. And there's a fundamental lack of understanding across party lines that is so infuriating.
It is. And I guess, on the part of, for me, when I look at this and I see so I like to think of myself as a guy in the middle of the road who I agree with a lot of the ideas on the left. And again, I think that there are some good ideas and some wonderful people, but I get frustrated, and I'm a guy in the middle who's aggravated at some of the inconsistencies, at some of the feelings that it's okay for Joe Biden to go to the funeral for George Floyd and support in a fundamental way the feeling of that group who are hurt. And there is nothing, and when we have a Congress who, at the opening of the Congress, has to have a prayer for, and end it with amen and a women, in support of the few people who are angry or hurt at the gender issue, we on the right say, hey, enough is enough. There were people on the left who came away from that and said, man, that's not going to end well. And that was it was a prayer. I'm going to go a little bit of a rant. I'm a member of a church right now. And there was a service, and again, as a part of the service, they were going out to pray for our politicians on both sides of the aisle. And they talked about it as a board and as a staff, and they opted to remove the whole service off of Facebook and YouTube, as they were not sure that it wouldn't be taken down, as it could be considered hate speech if they pray for one first over the other one. And this is the feeling that the writer having, that, okay, here's a great example. In the title of our video today was the word COVID, and our number one fan went to share it, and he couldn't share it because it had the word COVID in it. And we're feeling, as a writer of center, we are tired and we're frustrated at the closing in. And what you saw, I feel, is the extreme right. As in we saw the extreme left in July, you are seeing the extreme right who says enough is enough. It isn't only the election.
Yeah. So I want to.
Does that make sense?
It does. I want to give a little disclaimer here first. I'm a white guy, and I'm going to talk about some BLM movement related stuff. I want to make it very clear. I am a white cis dude that is going to talk about this stuff. So my opinions are my own, and I don't want to speak on behalf of them. I'm doing it just from the best of my understanding. But
well, I'll go one further, Will. I'm a bald white guy on the edge of Idaho, so I'm not going to say anything.
There. But this feeling that the right is experiencing, this feeling of being censored, of being actively pushed down, not heard, not having their opinion be invalidated from every direction. I wonder who could relate to that. I wonder. Absolutely. I wonder what immensely large racial group or groups in the United States could relate to that feeling. And I think people on the right who feel that way, who feel so frustrated and angry and like it almost, I imagine it feels like being like having your soul stuck in a pressure cooker, where you have all these things that you want to say and you want to be heard on a grand scale, like not just like me talking to a dude, but like sharing on Facebook or talking publicly or talking to your politicians, and you want to be heard and you don't. They ignore you. Right. Because of one facet of who you are, they write you off. Because you wear a MAGA hat, a large portion of the country is just ignoring you because they assume you're just that guy. That's it. That's all there is to it. And how infuriating that feels. I want people to come away from that feeling, and I want them to try and understand and try and empathize, try and find some common ground, some common empathetic ground with with the African American community and why they are so angry. And I want people in the African American community to also empathize with people on the right who feel like they are being ignored out of hand based simply because of how they dress or who they're voting for.
Right.
Now, there is a distinction to be drawn between who you're voting for being a point where people judge you and the color of your skin being the point where people judge you. There is a distinction there, I think, that's worth noting, but I still feel like the parallels are there to be found. And I feel like there's a lot of common ground that can be found between people.
But the angst here, I don't see as only the election. The election was sort of, it was a tipping point. It was a tipping point that pushed the vote.
So was George Floyd.
It came
George Floyd
on
was a
the
tipping point.
yes, and you were right. The Floyd issue was somebody died, as a tipping point. Here there was election loss, and that is, it can be argued that the election loss is a larger issue because of the fraud or the alleged fraud, I guess, the alleged fraud that happened. And again, that can be construed as a larger issue than just a single death. But I think anybody in their right mind would agree that a person dying is more important. The largest for me, and this is from one half of the Will and Dave show, is I know that if on Monday morning, if the First Lady, Mr. President, ran to California in their airplane and they went to the funeral for the lady who died the other day, the outcry in the media would be so intense.
Yeah. Yes, there is a distinction there, though. The lady who was shot here was one of the rioters. George Floyd was not. I think that's I agree with you, and I think that yeah, and I think it's largely contextual. On the surface, I should be okay with the president flying to see her. It's the problem that the people that perpetrated the riot would take that as tacit approval for their actions.
Yeah, I don't think there's any approval, or
there should.
I'm going to go one step further. If anybody listening to this show, all three of them, if you agree with the riots, if you agree with the violence, I really wish you'd hang up now, go away and watch the Bugs Bunny Roadrunner show.
Pander to your crap.
Yeah. There is no approval of that. No. For me. And again, this is what I want out of this whole thing is I want leadership who looks at the why and wants to bridge the gap.
Yeah.
And there is no leadership that wants to do that. I said to Will, I went looking for Biden's speeches in which he would offer
a metaphorical olive branch.
Yes, and not to Trump, but to the people, but to America. And so we have to heal. We have to rise above this. I had to search for a long, long time. And when I found it, it was sandwiched right smack in the middle of it's all Trump, and Trump is bad, and Trump is this, and Trump is that. And it took all the weight out of his olive branch when he spent the first half of the speech saying it's all Trump's fault. And I'm not excusing Trump, but
it was weird because throughout the entirety of last night, I remember when we first started watching Congress reassemble, the first couple of speeches, like Pence's speech, I was genuinely taken back at how wonderful Mike Pence's speech was. Followed again by, I think Mitch McConnell was next.
I think
Mitch McConnell's speech was also pretty good. There are a couple of points that might be worth critiquing, but it was a pretty damn good speech calling for unity and calling for people to work together. And then I can't remember the name of the head of the leader of the Democrats.
Schumer,
thank you. His speech was also pretty good. Similar to Mitch McConnell, where Mitch McConnell omitted some things that he should have addressed. Schumer said some things that didn't need to be said. He just started at the very end of his speech to start to sling crap at people, whereas McConnell didn't bother calling the rioters what they were. But those speeches started off good, and it just
that whistle hurt.
Sorry, it plummeted from there. It spiraled out of control, and it just went back to flinging crap across party lines.
Reminds me of the
Oh.
monkeys in the jungle when they throw feces at each other. That's sort of what I felt like in watching Congress the other day. Just a bunch of monkeys in a manure pile. It,
Yeah.
and so this was my afternoon, folks. I'm rebuilding my office this afternoon as Susan was doing her webinar, and it's on a green screen, and we had all the paraphernalia in here. So I'm rebuilding the office, and I'm tired, I'm in a bad mood. And I turned my iPad on, and I'm watching on YouTube the Rubin Report with Dave Rubin. And he's doing an interview with Tulsi Gabbard, who's one of my heroes. So actually in the comments, I will add a link to these interviews. And it was so refreshing to hear her viewpoints as a Democrat. And then I had to remind myself that she's no longer in Congress. She quit when she ran for president. And I'm like, why can't we have more people who are reasonable, who are leaders, who see the issues? I want to say one thing about her. Months ago, at the beginning of this whole election nonsense, she predicted riots and civil war.
I think
And she said, if we continue this, there's going to be an accounting. And this is a Democrat who was like, we have to do better.
Yeah. And it was aggravating because you and me were talking about it as Congress was coming back together and those good speeches were happening. We were talking about how, best case scenario, all this crap, what we can hope for. We can hope for, this is very obviously a cynical and jaded comment. I admit that thoroughly.
I'm going to mock you for it.
I hope that this incident would kind of put the fear of God into these politicians, that just because they sit on Capitol Hill doesn't mean they're untouchable. It doesn't mean they can't have real,
I only wish.
It waxes to me of people who, say heinous things online, who type out heinous things like, go kill yourself and stuff like that, feeling like they're untouchable. And whatever.
Heinous. You use the word heinous in a sentence twice, and you can't use suspect. You have to shorten it to sus. Seriously?
No. I do that because it's a colloquialism. It's a turn of phrase.
Okay, go on with your rant. I just had to heinous.
It's part of the internet zeitgeist, Dave. I say it with a purpose.
You say it to get me mad. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry. I interrupted your train of thought.
But the way in which people online tend to say things, assuming that there's going to be no repercussions because you can't see their face, you don't know where they live.
Right.
I feel like politicians have a lot of that same arrogance where they feel like they can say whatever they want. The worst that's going to happen is they might lose their job. But even that, it's hard to lose your job over one bad comment. And I kind of hoped that dudes breaking into their building and scaring the crap out of them might change that. And for a few minutes, we had that little bitty spark of hope, and then it was gone.
Well, I don't know, Will.
That would reach cross party lines and try to find common ground, and it just didn't happen. It took less than 6 hours for them to go right back to where they were, and it was depressing.
The one thing I think there was a difference is in between a Congress and the Senate. And the Senate was a little more reserved in their arguments. I'm a fan of Rand Paul, and he railed against this at length, against the whole thing. And we just need to get this done over with. But I'm going to make a prediction, Will, and it's disheartening. Is I think in the next election in the U.S., you're going to see on the right, you're going to see a moderate candidate, a safe candidate, who is going to be a Cruz or something like that, who will be the answer to Joe Biden. And it scares the crap out of me. As the only thing I liked about Trump, the only thing I liked about him is he was a bull in the china shop. Is I had hoped that he would wreck the system enough that we as a nation would wake up and say, maybe we can do better. But what we did is we said, maybe we need to go back to what we had 8 years ago.
Well, not just that. I feel like
4
this is
years
more of
ago.
a Democrat point of view. Is I feel like people got the feeling that, oh, we can get away with so much more than we ever thought we could, and that's the negative thing that I saw from, like, I with you, my like shoot for the moon hope for Trump when he got elected was that hopefully, yes, he would rattle things, he would shake things up, and hopefully we could see some kind of change, even
Right.
if it's not the good change. At least it could be change, then maybe something good could come further down the line. I never
Right.
thought Trump could really personally incite a lot of good change.
We should
But yeah,
answer
I
this
feel like
question.
as a society move forward,
Move to a private island somewhere where we're our own government.
Canada, just kidding, we're not that much better. uh yeah that's a question I think that's a lot bigger than than two balding guys on our up and coming podcast. I think that's a lot bigger.
But what's our
question than we
opinion, Will? What's your opinion? That's what we're giving tonight, anyways. None of this is fact.
I'm gonna quote my wife, not like verbatim because I can't remember the exact words, but I think everyone needs to find a bit more empathy, and that's not something that you're just like, oh, happier feelings towards everyone. That's not what it is. I would recommend to anyone, look up the difference, like Google the difference between empathy and sympathy, and there's a distinction, and I feel like we all need to engage in a little bit of active empathy, whether that active empathy comes through treating your fellow person of a different political leaning with a lot more respect than we have in the past, or whether that comes in terms of how we vote, or how we communicate with each other online. I feel like a little more civility and a lot more empathy will go a long ways on like on a small like grassroots level to trying to heal the hurts, because I feel like I feel it even today, and it's noticeable in the last couple of years that people, even within my own extended family with a different political lean, there's a divide. There's a definitive wall that's building up because we just can't seem to empathize with the other side. Like, oh, it's a good example. I'm going to use abortion as an example.
Oh, you're brave.
I know. I feel like people on the left view pro-lifers as people who just want to control their bodies. They just want to control the woman's body. They just want power. They want control. They want to make women subvert to their whims. And I don't think that's the case. I don't think pro-lifers want that. I think pro-lifers want to save babies. They want to save prospective lives and personalities and souls. And there is value in that, even if I don't agree with them. And then on the flip side, people on the right seem to think that Democrats just want to kill babies and use their cells for science. Whereas, no, they are fighting for a woman's bodily autonomy, for the government not to tell her what she can and can't do with her own body, which is something that blows my mind, that people don't understand that they're looking for bodily, like your freedom. They're fighting for freedom, which the right not wanting it's weird. And I feel like there's a lot of interesting meshing of ideas and common ground in just that, just those two little pieces of a viewpoint that we just ignore because they're them, we're us. Find the bad in them, point it out, don't let them see the bad in us, and vice versa. And it's just combative.
It was interesting. No, go ahead.
It's just a lot of people that I've talked to recently, when I talk about, trying to meet in the middle, they're like, yeah, but we don't want to concede these points. You don't have to concede points. There are places in every political argument, if you look hard enough, where there is a meshing, there is a blending of points. There is a middle ground. It is not conceding. It is not giving up your moral standing. It is not betraying your own values. It is looking for value in somebody else's values. That makes sense.
Yeah, that's what empathy is, right? It's looking for an area where you can agree with.
I think by definition, empathy is trying to.
It's right there. I have it on the screen.
Empathy is ability to recognize, understand, and share the thoughts and feelings. Yeah, that. So yeah, and then valuing that.
It was it was interesting. I was watching an interview or sort of roundtable with Sam Harris, who I really appreciate. He's an atheist. I don't agree with everything, except he's reasoned in his arguments. With him, with Shapiro, who you don't like, with Dave Rubin, who I kind of like, he's okay, and with who was the fourth one? There was a fourth one. I can't remember. Was it Joe Rogan? Maybe I can't. Anyways,
That'd be an interesting panel.
it was a good panel. I don't think it was Rogan. He wouldn't get involved in that. It was just Shapiro, Harris. Who was the fourth? Anyways, it doesn't matter. From very different points of view, and yet it was a civil conversation.
God forbid.
Yeah, I mean, they're sitting there, and they don't agree on a lot. I was watching the interview, the Joe Rogan interview with Ben Shapiro. Like, very good. And they're pretty much diametrically opposed in a lot of areas, and yet they were able to.
That applies to a lot of pundits like Ben Shapiro, that if you pull them out of
entertainment,
yeah, you pull them out of entertainment, or you pull them out of a place where they have an axe to grind, they're much more reasonable and level-headed than most people on the left. And this flips both ways. You take someone like what's an example? I'm trying to think of like super hard left pundits.
Hard left
pundits.
Oh gosh,
I don't follow a lot of them. I don't follow a lot of pundits in general. The right-wing ones are
use a right one. Use Tucker. He's a great example. We can both agree that he's a pain in the neck.
Yeah.
Your Uncle Mallory really likes him, but he's about the only one I know.
I will say, this is something that I mentioned in my post on Tucker Carlson. It's part of the reason that I don't like Tucker Carlson, is I've seen some of his old work on like Crossfire and stuff like that.
Yeah.
He is not a stupid person.
No.
I think he is fully aware of how inflammatory the things he say are, but he does them anyways because they pay the bills.
Absolutely.
That's part of why I dislike him, is because he does that.
I think you can look at most of the pundits on TV.
Yeah.
And you could use that sentence if it's on the right or the left. For the majority of them, it's a job.
It's funny. There's like a parallel to be drawn with working in blue collar work. Like I work in a job that I would consider blue collar.
Mm-hmm.
The people that I work with, the way we act at work, the way we talk, the way we carry ourselves, the way we interact with each other. If we meet each other outside work or at a Christmas party for work,
right,
completely different human beings.
Absolutely.
Jim that is a welder and drops F-bombs 3 times a sentence and all this stuff. You might catch him at the Christmas party and he'll wear a suit. He'll bring his wife. He'll talk eloquently. He'll eat with table manners.
Yeah.
At a person's environment.
We all do that.
Yeah. And it's just, we forget that when it comes to these celebrities, these pundits, these political commentators and politicians, we forget that.
I think we hope for more out of our politicians, though. I don't think.
Oh God, yes.
I don't think any of us hope for more from entertainment. We do hope for more from news people. We do hope for more from news people. I would agree. We hope more from those who are meant to inform us, but we do hope for more from our politicians as they are leading our country, which used to be one of the greatest countries in the world. I'm not convinced it is anymore, but they're the leaders of the free world for sure. And
that few minutes at the beginning of Congress again, when Pence spoke and everything, for a few minutes there, they showed us.
It was the Senate, by the way, not Congress.
Senate. They showed us
Yes.
what they are capable of doing. They showed us how thoughtful they can be, how considerate they can be.
Yes.
They showed us. We now have a marker. We can put that mark up. That's the bar now. We know they can do it. And we need to hold, like, we as voters on both sides of the political spectrum should be holding them to that.
But we all have seen the video of the hurdles and the first guy that makes the hurdles. You're like, yes, we can all do that. And the next guy is John Candy, who runs through and knocks every pylon down because he doesn't care. That is what I think is happening. They look at Mitt Romney, in which he's eloquent in decrying what's going on, And they look at it and said, yeah, no, I don't think so, and run through the hurdles.
And
We're not going to reach that bar. We're not even going to try to make the bar.
And that's just it. Like, while I say that's setting a standard, not everyone can be on their best every day. Not everyone can do the best every day. But it just goes to show how much better they can be. They can do so much better than they do right now.
See, I don't know, Will.
Well, I don't think they're going to be better.
Well, I do think, though, that if you're in a position of leadership, if you're the pastor of a church, you have to be on your best behavior if you're up at the podium. You don't go up there with your shirt untucked, your shoes untied, in a ratty t-shirt. You don't do that because it's what your job requires of you. And when you are the president or you're a senator or you're a congressman, you need to be more aware of what your job is, and your job is to govern the country. It's not to pursue your own agenda. And I think for way too many, here in the U.S. especially, there's no term limits in Congress or the Senate, so you can be there until you die. Just look at Nancy Pelosi, for crying out loud. Her railing, "You're out of order," the other night was so funny. I don't think anybody on the right or the left has any respect for that woman, and yet she keeps, I don't know what dirt she has on who, but it's pretty scary that she stays in power. And you look at these, you're looking something up?
Yes, I'm reminded of an article that I heard about, and I'm going to try and find it because it is very relative.
This whole, where are the leaders? I look at Joe Biden, and I say, he won. I said he won within a week after the election. I'd given up and said, okay, it's over. Let's move on with life. But he won.
First, lawsuits rolling out.
He won, and I'm like, okay, so how are you going to lead? Are you going to spend your whole time hollering at Trump? And it seems to me to be that's the case. He's just going to yell at Trump because it's what he did. It's how he got elected, and I don't think he's going to stop. I haven't seen any evidence that he's going to stop.
Well, I mean, Trump's kind of hard to forget right now, but I think it's a 50-50. I can't make up my mind on whether or not I think Biden is going to ride the anti-Trump train all through his presidency, or if he's going to do his level best to put the Trump thing behind him as quickly as possible in an attempt to get people to draw as sharp a contrast between him and Trump as possible. I'm not sure which he's going to go for. I hope it's the latter.
Yeah, all he'd have to do is not be senile and not be angry all the time, and he'd be fine and not lie. I mean, he could show the difference in so many ways that he's not. And unfortunately, our current commander-in-chief has set the behavior bar so low that it's not sort of easy to rise above it.
A rock could be more polite than him, because at least a rock would say nothing.
So in that vein, I was looking for research for the show, and I messaged over to Will and said, "Hey, what do you think if we play the Trump concession speech in the show?" And we're like, that's an interesting thought, maybe. And then I went and I played the speech from 4 hours before the concession speech. And you made the apt observation that he read a speech in the second one. The first one is his real speech, and it sucked. And he was Trump.
Awful.
And
it wasn't a concession speech. It was
no. You need to go home, and I'm proud of you.
Oh God, yes. That's
we love you very much. Now go home and be peaceful.
That's something that we can agree was atrocious, was how Trump handled it. I think that there are failings in failings in Biden's behalf of not being as much of a unifying voice as he could have been, and harping to and trying to get as many political points as possible. But Trump's inability to decry the people that did it was appalling.
Yeah. So it is going to be interesting, and Will, as we wrap up this evening, that where do we go from here as a country? Where do we go from here as media? I was reading a post on Facebook. I was going to put it on the screen and I didn't because it just makes me mad. It's a Trump supporter, and in their Facebook post it goes on, we're really happy we have a new president. And now, is it going to be okay that every time you do something, we blame Russia collusion, or every time we do something, it's your fault, or every time somebody dies, it's your fault? And are you there, Will, or did you freeze?
Yeah, no, I'm here. Oh wait, no, I guess I am frozen.
You're frozen. You want to hop out and come back in?
Yeah, give me half a second.
And I just wonder if when we go back to normal in 11 days, 14 days, whenever the heck it is, what's normal going to look like? And how do we move forward?
Yeah.
From this moment of divisiveness, which even now, we have a president who said, I'm not going to go to the inauguration, and the other guy's saying that's the only thing that we've agreed on. Like, this is in school, in Tim's vernacular, and there's my big word for the day. This is schoolyard politics. I'm not going to go to your house. I'm not going to bring you to my house. There's no civility on either side of the political aisle. It's obvious from almost the fistfights in Congress, and the ones who do have any civility are older than you, me, and Tim combined. They have one foot in the grave. Where do we go from here? And the good ones, i.e. our Tulsi Gabbard, are saying, no, I ran for president. I didn't get very far. I'm going to move on in life and do something else.
I can only imagine how stressful of a job it is to work in that environment and to try and have,
I would agree,
the moral standards that we're looking for in a politician, that it must be soul draining.
I would agree.
It's, I don't know. Like I don't think I'm educated enough to speak towards what we can actually do going forward. I would say that I feel like people on the left, and this is something that I get, this is all purely anecdotal. I want to be clear about that. This is purely anecdotal, and what I personally have been able to read online.
Mm-hmm.
In the month leading up to the election, a lot of people on the left were not super thrilled that Joe Biden was their representative, because they don't really love Joe Biden. Like you say, he is still an old fuddy-duddy, and he's got some baggage from his past as well that he's bringing into this.
Right.
And people on the left people on the left were talking about holding him to task. And despite the fact that he's getting elected, we need to hold him to be better than he has been, because he's not yet what we want. He needs to do more. We want him to win because we don't want Trump, but we have high expectations.
Right.
And that seems to have been forgotten lately. Like, all my reading around this incident now and the actual election itself, kind of post-election, and with all the fraud claims and everything, is now it seems to be an overwhelming amount of relief that Biden's the president. And I want to say that we need to have those higher standards. I'm happy that Trump's gone too, but Biden has a lot of ground to make up to be a president, like to be a worthy president, I think.
For most,
a long ways from the target.
For most of us on the right, I think in the election for Trump 4 years ago, we sort of held our nose on the right and voted for Trump and said, you know what? It's not Hillary, so we're going to vote for Trump. We hold our nose, we do the X on the thing and we go on. Yeah. And I believe in this election, and the left and a lot of the Republicans as well sort of did the same thing. Hold your nose and vote for Biden, even though for progressives, he is so far not there. You just have to look at his cabinet picks and know this guy is as centrist as they come. Always has been, always will be.
Yeah.
It's
aggravating. I think it's extra aggravating people on the left right now that we won the Senate as well. I wasn't sure that I wanted Democrats to win the Senate because I wanted there to be more accountability towards the things that they want to do with this presidency. But now the pressure is going to be on Biden. Now he has the power. He
Yeah.
has the power to enact the change that people on the left really truly want
Yep.
in a constructive way.
Right.
And he could do it very quickly now. He has that kind of power. And so all eyes are going to be on him to do stuff with it. And if he sits on his haunches and remains centrist and just sits there and poo-poos on what Trump did and tries to backtrack some of the things Trump did,
Right.
it's not going to go well. And I couldn't agree more, Tim. The USA needs a third choice.
What do you think of the media? How much of this is the media's fault?
There's a reason I don't watch a lot of mainstream media. I watch it purely to get their take on it because I don't think that their take is the truth very often.
Right.
I believe that their take is purely a way to kind of point myself in the right direction to go looking for truth.
Right.
Because at this point I have no faith in it whatsoever. None. It is so almost every media station is so bought and paid for by one party or the other.
I don't know if it is necessarily by the party as much as the interest behind the party.
Yeah.
The Republicans and the Democrats, I think, are
representatives of those ideals. Basically.
Yes, are amoral.
Poster children.
Right. And here's the issue with a third choice, though. And you just have to look at Canada as a great example of,
it's hard to
you've
do.
had the marijuana party for a lot of years. They never get anywhere because they only are representing such a small percentage of the population that it just is taking the votes away from the party that may be able to do something. And even if they get in power, it usually is minority government, and then you have this nonsense. And the U.S.
It ends up being a stalemate.
It was never meant to operate that way. Now, I would love if we could get rid of the two-party system, except it does work sometimes. It was designed to work. I don't think our government is anywhere near what it was meant to be back in 1776 or whenever the Declaration of Independence was written.
I agree that the two-party system was designed to work. The problem is right now we're kind of trending towards and kind of entrenched in the worst parts of that system.
Right.
I agree with you that multi-party systems have so many problems that are very surface level and very what's the word, pervasive.
Mm-hmm.
Like I look at the NDP, and the NDP as a left winger, the NDP should be my clear choice to vote. But voting for them is so difficult because I can pretty much guarantee that they're not going to win. At best, they might win seats, and that's the best I can hope for because they're not going to win federally. That's just currently not going to happen.
Here's one of
any small party.
Here's one of my hopes is that any left party, if you would get away from the minority issues, from the gender wars and embroiling yourself in the gender stuff, in the little things which are not important. And we look at the amen and the a woman at the end of a prayer and we say, enough already. And this is what us on the right are saying. Ignore that stuff. It doesn't matter.
See,
you're going to say a but there, I know. And
not quite. It's a small but.
Well, it's not either you or me then.
It's one of those things where I kind of agree with you in a sense. Things like the amen and a woman thing, there are so few people that give a flying fornication or fornication about that it's laughable. Like or the national anthem. Like honestly, in Canada, use the national anthem as an example.
It's a great example.
Yeah, I'm okay with the national anthem in its modified state. I couldn't care less. It's something that I sing at hockey games and very occasionally on patriotic occasions. And I just don't
When were you
care.
last at a hockey game?
Long time ago.
Yeah, okay. I just want to make that clear.
I don't care.
Right.
And it's so, it's one of those things where I'm like, cool, it happened. It's more inclusive. whatever. And I think most people on the left kind of feel similarly ish, but the politicians in place think that, ooh, this is an easy win that we can chalk up to gender equality and all these
Right.
things to
Right.
make us look good. And again, it's down to political points
Yes.
and not actual change. And I think that any left-wing party in power that wants to set themselves apart. So this is why I say it's a little but I do generally agree with what you're saying, that they need to actually focus on big change. Now, when it comes to certain aspects of gender politics, I want to add the addendum that I think there are certain areas of gender politics that really do need looking at in terms of human rights issues. But in terms of like a man and a woman and national anthems, screw that stuff. We've got bigger fish to fry.
Right.
Way
It,
bigger fish to fry.
I really wish at the end of the day, if we could, there are issues, if it be deficits or healthcare or education, there are these huge issues in society that if we could fix, the rest wouldn't matter. If we could fix this whole issue of healthcare and the war, what are you laughing at? Or do I want to know?
Basic income.
Yeah. If we could fix universal basic income, well, we're gonna spend an episode on that one, as it's a big topic.
I want to clarify that it's something that's like a pipe dream kind of thing. If we could ever get there, I think it could be great. But getting there is such a monumental and almost absurdly insurmountable task.
We're going to talk about that as
I think it's
I disagree with the great idea part. I agree that it's going to be a monumental task, and Tim, I know, will disagree that it's a great idea too.
Oh, probably.
And he's the only other one on right now. But it's something that we look at. If these larger issues were fixed, even with UBI, I mean, if we could fix this overarching hurt, if it be healthcare, if it be economics, if it be our national debt, all these things, who would care about the A man and the A woman?
Yeah, I think that
it wouldn't be an issue. Or if you had a rate
problems were fixed, it wouldn't be such a big deal to allocate some resources to fixing the smaller issues. It wouldn't need to be such a big kerfuffle. It could just be maintenance. It's a small thing,
right?
Something that gets tweaked.
It was something had a conversation with a lady a while ago, and we were talking about the COVID stuff, and this whole idea that it's okay for Walmart to be open, for Home Depot to be open, and for mom and pop have a bakery and they get 18 people a day in their shop, it's not okay to be open, and they're going bankrupt. And we're going through all these lengths, these huge lengths to do all these things, and the little people are dying. Either economically or physically dying, not from COVID either, but from other stuff.
Yeah.
We ignore the large issues in some areas, and we focus on the A men and A women. And in other areas, we look at these huge issues, if it be economics with COVID, and we ignore the little guy. And we say, screw the little guy. We're going to go with people who have more bread on the shelves because, that helps people.
I'm gonna use a right-wing buzz phrase here.
Oh boy.
I think it really, honestly, a lot of it boils down to common sense. And I think that goes both ways. I think common sense in terms of we have these big problems like COVID that need big solutions, but common sense would be to not crush the entrepreneurial spirit of the United States in the process. And then the flip side would be that, common sense would say to fix things like healthcare, housing, student debt, etc., and not waste our time on things like the exact phraseology of certain certain sayings or bathroom signs, which again, those are things
nationalistic anthems.
Yeah, those are things that should be addressed, but they can be addressed by a much smaller team, and they don't need to be headlining stuff, and they don't need to be the things that politicians sell their platforms on.
Right.
There are much bigger fish to fry, and common sense denotes that those big things need to be fixed too. And I think we all get lost our politicians rather get lost in the sauce of doing the thing their party expects, and then people start, because their politicians tell them that this is what the people want,
Right.
They believe them.
Right. It's actually interesting in light of that statement. I think of Joe Biden at the funeral for George Floyd,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that was a political move.
Yeah,
It was 100% a political move. It had nothing to do with solidarity for the movement.
Yeah.
Had nothing to do with solidarity for Floyd. It was a political move.
And so many people look at that and be like, "Oh, he really cares," and it's like,
No,
he doesn't.
no.
I mean, maybe
He's
he
another
does,
one of the
but
monkeys on the manure pile, and he found this little piece of horse manure that he could call his own, and he grabbed it. And
yeah, and yeah.
So we
I want to cap this off. The study that I was trying to find, and I
okay, you found it. Oh, good.
I've touched on it.
Okay, good.
And it's who was it done by? To read here. Recent experiment by, it doesn't tell me. So it's done by the American Psychological Association, and it was written in the Journal of Experimental Psychology. This is in 2018. So this is a published and peer-reviewed study. I can't say any more to its validity than that it is published and peer-reviewed. That's the extent of my knowledge of its validity. And it's only one study. I don't have the time really quite yet to look into all the numbers.
Right.
The gist of it is that the average person has a very high proclivity to change their political views based on their politicians' political views or or the celebrities that they follow political views.
Right.
People will literally completely flip their political opinions based on what the politician that they voted for says, not based on how they feel. That's not to say everyone does that, but that is a very large number of people that do that. And I feel like that is, looking at that, I'm not saying that some people do or don't do that. I'm saying when you see that and you hear that, look inside yourself. Try to pick apart what things your politicians are saying that are things that you yourself support and believe, and the things that you are supporting and believing because they told you that the people want that. It's kind of a form of hero worship, I think, in a sense, like in the same way that, people have celebrities or more personal things like, a big brother or something like that can do no wrong.
But it's hard though, Will.
It is. It's so difficult. Like, I'm not saying that everyone needs to do this, otherwise you're stupid. I do it too.
But it's early. It's easy early on in the process when there's 18 candidates and you're voting between 18 people. And at the beginning of Republican primaries, I had a Ben Carson I could vote for, who I really appreciate and I admire. But once it weeds down, you are left to one or two or three in that party, and you're like, but they all suck. When you look at Canada, and your choices were Trudeau
and Jagmeet, who can't win.
Who was running against him?
Trudeau? I don't know if anyone was running against him because he was the prime minister already.
No, at your last election, who was running against him at the last election?
Andrew Scheer and Jagmeet Singh were the main two.
Was it Scheer or Peter O'Toole? I thought it was Peter O'Toole. It was Scheer.
Okay, I believe.
And you look at the three and you say, that's not that is so not what anybody wanted. And yet it's who you have to vote for.
Singh Stan, so I kind of think he's what a lot of people wanted, but can't vote for.
It's one of
the two-party thing.
It's one of the issues of, if you're a weed smoker and you want to vote for the marijuana party, sure, go ahead, but it's not going to do anything. And I think for most of us, we want our voice to count, so we hold our nose and we vote. And
I think it's worth making a distinction right there.
Okay,
it's okay to voting for people that you don't fully agree with, but because they represent the party that the majority of their things agree with you, or because you want that party to win over the opposing party. That's one thing. Or I'll word this differently. I feel like rather than looking at it as, look inward and differentiating yourself, all the different nuances of your political leaders, etc.
Right.
Look at it differently. try to criticize there have got to be ways to criticize your own political leaders. I think if people on the left can criticize their leaders more, I think it will go a long way towards creating a more nuanced and more fleshed out political landscape. And that goes for everyone. I feel like people are very reticent to criticize
Right.
political leaders in their own party, and that's something that I it's not something that I sit here and say I do regularly because it just comes easy to me. It's something that I have to actively go out of my way, and like I literally have a note by my computer that tells me to get mad at everyone. I'm there's an old saying that I used to love, which is I'm not racist, I hate everyone equally. I distrust all politicians equally, and I try my best when I see something. I try to, if it's a guy on the left and he's like, I'm going to do this great thing and there's nothing wrong with it, this is the best idea ever. I'm like, I can find a way that is not the best idea, even though I voted for you.
So Tim will remember this, and you might. I mean, there is a policeman, RCMP officer up in our hometown by the name of Crow. Remember hearing about Crow? And Tim will remember. He used to brag that he could pull over a brand new vehicle and give it a ticket for a violation for something. He could find a flaw in a brand new vehicle for something that was wrong. Everybody hated Crow because he was a pain in the neck. He used to give more tickets out. I'm sure he funded half of the police station in Fort St. John, their umpteen $1 million abortion that they're building up there. But it was one of his things that he used to brag that he could give anybody a ticket. Because there always is a flaw somewhere, and I think that you're right. There always is. I think any politician.
It's not just finding them though; it's also being okay to speak out about them. I want people.
Yeah.
I want Democrats
in a civilized manner.
In a civilized manner, but I want them to hold Joe Biden to task. I don't want them to praise Joe Biden because he's not Trump endlessly. I want them to come out of the woodwork when Joe Biden does things that are against the reasons that we voted for him. I say that as if I voted for him, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
I want them to hold him to task. I want them to hold him accountable to their ideals that they voted him in place for.
Right.
Even if he didn't display them when he was like in his campaign, the people that voted him in, there's some very big ideas that they should hold him to, and that should apply to most Republicans too. I want them to hold their leaders to task, and I want them to criticize their leaders. Even if they vote for them and love them for 9/10 of what they do, we can still criticize them for that last tenth.
Yes, we can, and we should. I agree with you.
They literally signed up for it. That's what they're doing.
I wholeheartedly agree. That is why they put their name on the ballot.
Yeah.
Is so they can get the horse manure flung at them.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's the price they pay.
Yeah. We've been live for an hour and 20 minutes, Will.
Great episode.
It's been a long time, man. We didn't even get mad at each other. I thought there was going to be more fireworks here, but...
See, I think that our own personal conversations where we kind of aired our like really fiery grievances, and then we both left and then came back a day later to make the show. I think we had time to do exactly what we're preaching about today, which is find that common ground, find that fabric.
Oh.
And as much as I also wanted to get angry, and as much as
his great ratings
sells on radio,
the only one who watched the whole show was Tim. Thank you, Tim. You're gonna be a sponsor just for getting our YouTube stats up. Tim Van den Heuvel.
I still this is what I wanted from our show. I want not like we're not being an example today of being angry at each other and coming together at the end. Now we're being an example of we already were angry at each other, and this is the us coming together part. This is the meeting together.
We really need to get angry once so they can see it, because I don't think anybody's ever seen it.
We have to make a point then of not talking about these things beforehand.
Well, I thought this was going to be the one as we ended on such it wasn't an angry note. We both said at the end, man, we're going to have a good conversation Saturday.
Half an hour before the show we were arguing about stuff.
And here we are.
Half an hour was enough time.
We really get mad at each other, folks. Really, we do. We don't like it. I mean, we love each other, but those I love, I yell at.
That's how you show your love, Dave.
Yeah. So next week, I think we are going to do the vaccine rollout stuff because there's some
talk about that.
there's some nonsense happening there on every side of the border. Oh my gosh.
And don't worry, with talking about all this Capitol Hill stuff, we have not forgotten about all the social media and censorship aspect that has come along. We're just saving that for a further down the road once it's all kind of leveled out a little bit. We're going to get into that too.
So here's a question, and we can end on this if you like. I'll let you answer it in closing. What are the odds that the mainstream media, so including Fox News now, is because they sort of abandoned the orange-haired man at the end.
He's no longer going to win, so they're dropping him like a wet rag.
So what are the odds that mainstream media is going to rip into Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
Honestly, pretty slim. I think apart from people like OANN, I don't think many people are going to rip into them because I think even on a mainstream media, like a machine that thrives off conflict, I think even the MSM wants to put forth a good story this next coming few weeks. So I don't think they're going to criticize them as much as I think they should probably deserve to be criticized.
You know, Tim, I agree. But we swore at each other a lot more than Will and I do. And Tim has an answer to the media question, not a chance. And I agree. I think the media is so in love with the far left that I don't think that you're going to see a few late night who get after Joe and his gaffes because he's going to make them. He made them when he was VP. He's going to make them now. But I don't think...
They're going to have to find a new shtick now. They're going to have to find a new dead horse to beat. And
I don't think it's going to be near as
hard to do.
As antagonistic. That's the word. Thank you. That's way too big a word. I should stick to sus. What the heck? Well, Will, so next week it's COVID.
More lighthearted conversation.
Yeah. We have some fun things in the works, guys, and we're going to get to them. We're just working on some scheduling for who we can have on when. Yeah, it's a lot of fun doing this as we get to have we're looking for fun conversations that are hard conversations.
Everything because we can't pay anyone, so they don't really have a lot of incentive to be here, apart from our sunshiny dispositions.
Yeah, and that was on full display tonight. After all my warnings on Facebook that there was going to be in-flight entertainment.
I'd like to think we were entertaining.
There you go. Anyways, guys, have yourself a great week, and we will be here same time, same station next week.
That's right. Stay safe. Don't die.